Bible quiz. Genesis, creation, Noah's flood. Question 1. What does the creation of light in Genesis chapter 1 symbolize? Options. 1. A. The beginning of God's judgment on darkness. 2. B. The introduction of chaos into the world. 3. C. God's power to bring order and goodness from nothingness. 4. D. The separation of humanity from the divine. The answer is option 3, C. God's power to bring order and goodness from nothingness. Genesis chapter 1 verses 3 to 5. It symbolizes God's ability to create order and goodness from chaos. Question 2. How does God show love in creating the Garden of Eden? Options. 1. A. By testing Adam and Eve's obedience through hardship. 2. B. By providing a perfect environment for Adam and Eve to thrive. 3. C. By limiting Adam and Eve's access to knowledge. 4. D. By creating dangerous animals to challenge Adam and Eve. The answer is option 2, B. By providing a perfect environment for Adam and Eve to thrive. Genesis chapter 2 verses 8 to 9. God's provision of a perfect home demonstrates his love. Question 3. What does the tree of knowledge of good and evil symbolize? Options. 1. A. God's unlimited power and control over humanity. 2. B. The importance of agriculture in human civilization. 3. C. Humanity's free will and the choice between obedience and disobedience. 4. D. The superiority of knowledge over innocence. The answer is option 3, C. Humanity's free will and the choice between obedience and disobedience. Genesis chapter 2 verses 16 to 17. It represents the choice between trusting God and defining good/evil for themselves. Question 4. How does God's provision of clothing for Adam and Eve after the fall demonstrate his love? Options. 1. A. It shows God's indifference to their sin. 2. B. It symbolizes God's judgment and punishment. 3. C. It represents God's care and protection despite their disobedience. 4. D. It highlights the importance of physical appearance. The answer is option 3, C. It represents God's care and protection despite their disobedience. Genesis chapter 3 verse 21. God's provision shows his continued care even after sin. Question 5. What does Cain's murder of Abel symbolize? Options. 1. A. The triumph of good over evil. 2. B. The beginning of human civilization and progress. 3. C. The destructive consequences of sin and broken relationships. 4. D. The importance of sacrifice in religious practice. The answer is option 3, C. The destructive consequences of sin and broken relationships. Genesis chapter 4 verse 8. It symbolizes the fracturing of human relationships due to sin. Question 6. How does God show his provision for Cain after his sin? Options. 1. A. By immediately forgiving Cain and restoring him to his former status. 2. B. By banishing Cain from his presence but marking him for protection. 3. C. By rewarding Cain with increased agricultural success. 4. D. By ignoring Cain's sin and allowing him to continue as normal. The answer is option 2, B. By banishing Cain from his presence but marking him for protection. Genesis chapter 4 verse 15. God protects Cain, showing mercy even in judgment. Question 7. What does the genealogy in Genesis chapter 5 signify? Options. 1. A. The increasing righteousness of humanity over time. 2. B. The decreasing lifespan of humans and the spread of sin. 3. C. God's approval of intermarriage between different groups of people. 4. D. The irrelevance of family history in God's plan. The answer is option 2, B. The decreasing lifespan of humans and the spread of sin. Genesis chapter 5. It shows the decline in human lifespan, reflecting sin's impact. Question 8. Why did God decide to send the flood? Options. 1. A. Because he regretted creating humanity and wanted to start over. 2. B. Because humanity's wickedness was great and their hearts were continually evil. 3. C. Because the earth was overpopulated and resources were scarce. 4. D. Because he wanted to demonstrate his power and authority over creation. The answer is option 2, B. Because humanity's wickedness was great and their hearts were continually evil. Genesis chapter 6 verse 5. God's grief over humanity's wickedness led to the decision to flood the earth. Question 9. What does Noah represent in the story of the flood? Options. 1. A. The perfect and sinless human being. 2. B. The remnant of righteousness preserved by God's grace. 3. C. The futility of human effort in the face of divine judgment. 4. D. The importance of wealth and power in gaining God's favor. The answer is option 2, B. The remnant of righteousness preserved by God's grace. Genesis chapter 6 verses 8 to 9. Noah found favor in God's eyes and was chosen for his righteousness. Question 10. How does God show his provision for Noah and his family? Options. 1. A. By abandoning them to face the flood on their own. 2. B. By providing detailed instructions for building the ark and saving the animals. 3. C. By warning them of the flood but offering no means of escape. 4. D. By expecting them to survive through their own ingenuity and strength. The answer is option 2, B. By providing detailed instructions for building the ark and saving the animals. Genesis chapter 6 verses 14 to 16. God's specific instructions ensured their survival. Question 11. What does the ark symbolize? Options. 1. A. The temporary nature of God's protection. 2. B. God's judgment and wrath against sin. 3. C. Salvation and refuge from divine judgment. 4. D. Human self-reliance and independence from God. The answer is option 3, C. Salvation and refuge from divine judgment. Genesis chapter 7. The ark represents God's plan to save Noah and his family from destruction. Question 12. What does the dove returning with an olive branch symbolize? Options. 1. A. The end of God's judgment and the beginning of a new era. 2. B. The futility of seeking peace in a world filled with sin. 3. C. The importance of sacrifice in appeasing God's wrath. 4. D. The temporary nature of peace and reconciliation. The answer is option 1, A. The end of God's judgment and the beginning of a new era. Genesis chapter 8 verse 11. It signifies that the floodwaters are receding and life is returning. Question 13. How does God demonstrate his love and care after the flood? Options. 1. A. By immediately abandoning Noah and his family to rebuild on their own. 2. B. By establishing a covenant with Noah, promising never to destroy the earth with a flood again. 3. C. By demanding sacrifices and offerings to appease his anger. 4. D. By remaining distant and uninvolved in the affairs of humanity. The answer is option 2, B. By establishing a covenant with Noah, promising never to destroy the earth with a flood again. Genesis chapter 9 verse 11. God's covenant ensures the continuation of life and order. Question 14. What does the rainbow symbolize in God's covenant with Noah? Options. 1. A. The ongoing threat of divine judgment and destruction. 2. B. A reminder of God's promise and faithfulness. 3. C. The limited scope of God's love and mercy. 4. D. A sign of human achievement and progress. The answer is option 2, B. A reminder of God's promise and faithfulness. Genesis chapter 9 verses 13 to 16. The rainbow serves as a token of God's covenant and promise. Question 15. How does God's command to Noah to be fruitful and multiply reflect his original plan? Options. 1. A. It indicates that God has given up on his original creation. 2. B. It shows that God's purposes for humanity remain despite sin and judgment. 3. C. It implies that humanity must earn God's favor through hard work. 4. D. It suggests that God's plan is easily thwarted by human disobedience. The answer is option 2, B. It shows that God's purposes for humanity remain despite sin and judgment. Genesis chapter 9 verse 1. It reiterates God's original blessing and commission to fill the earth. Thank you for watching the quiz. Please subscribe for more content.